Hi, I'm Nicola McKenzie, founder, mortgage and insurance specialist here at DM Mortgages. And in today's video, I'm joined by a very special guest, Hazel Johnston from Legal & General. And she will be here to talk to us about the importance of financial protection and providing some industry updates. So to hear more, stay tuned. So Hazel, thank you so much for joining us today. Honestly, I was so pleased when you agreed to do this interview. So it's lovely to have you. Start with telling us a little bit about what you do at Legal & General.
Yeah, so my role is a market development manager, and essentially my job is to help advisors find ways of helping their clients plan their financial resilience. So we talk about protection and insurance, but essentially what that product is it's helping people make sure that their future is actually stable, and that even if they fall ill, fall sick, even just for a short period, or pass away, that actually it's not going to impact the financial goals that they've set with that advisor sat in front of them.
Absolutely. So that brings me on then to my next question, which is, you or Legal & General produce a really impactful report, which is called the Deadline to Breadline report, if I'm right in saying.
Yeah.
And one of the key statistics that stood out from that report for me was that the average UK household has only 19 days worth of savings or provisions before they hit the breadline. That to me is a very shocking statistic. Why do you think, despite that, people still take financial protection perhaps lightly or more lightly than they should?
Yes, I think to me it all comes down to education. So actually when you look at when we're in school, we don't get taught anything really about finances. Before I was in a estate agency, I had no idea what a mortgage even really was, and then obviously progressed through to become an advisor, and I learned so much about personal finance through the luck of the career I picked. Not because I was taught it from elsewhere. So I think that's the first step, is it doesn't become an integrated part of somebody's life from a young age. But then I also think people aren't adverse to insurance. Like, we insure our pets. I've got a beagle at home. She has insurance if anything was to happen, but it's because I can physically see her. And it's the same with, you know, cars, houses. We can see the things that we want to insure, whereas actually when we think about our health, or when we think about the volatility of our income potentially changing, that's far harder to visualise. Whereas actually when you do look at claim statistics for any provider, they are really strong. So again, I think customer perception, I can see why, but maybe the perception's different from the reality of what these products actually can do.
I think you're exactly right. There are a lot of misconceptions around insurance. And so what do you think then that as an industry we can do to kind of help people to understand the realities of insurance?
Yeah, and I think that's where that Deadline to Breadline research comes in. So although that's a document designed for advisors, what it did show us is people don't take time to really look at the reality of their situation. And I think that's where financial advice is really important, because even myself, I'll misjudge how much my outgoings are each month, because I'll think, well, it's just such and such, I'll round it up or I'll round it down. And actually, when you really take time to dive deeply into your financial situation now and goals for the future, that's when you can get a really good understanding of where the risk is. So financial advice is really important, but I also think that financial advice needs to be personable. So we can look at claim statistics, we can look at case studies of something happening to somebody else over there, but that's never your own circumstances.
Very true.
So you need to take the time to really look at what sick pay do you actually have? What provision do you actually have? And you might have sick pay, you might have savings, that's amazing if you do, but are they really enough? And do you actually want to use them? Because if you do use them, are you achieving those financial goals you've set for yourself?
So true.
So to me, it's all about making it personable. And when I was advising myself, that's what I tried to work hard to do, was actually look at that individual in front of me and think, what matters to them? And as a customer, that's what you need to think about. What is it that really matters to you? And how do you want to achieve that?
So true. And you're exactly right. The amount of, over the years, clients that I've had that don't know their sick pay or think it's, or sometimes I'll say, how much do you get paid sick pay? Full pay is the answer. It's like, no, you're not going to get full pay forever. There isn't an employer in existence that I'm aware of that's just going to pay, someone for 30 years if they can never work again. So you're exactly right. It's about people truly understanding where they are in terms of the provisions they have, because only then can they look at the shortfalls accurately. Exactly. But I also think as well, and I don't know your thoughts on this, that people do generally tend to underestimate the impact of having an illness. And again, a common response that sometimes we can get from our clients is that, well, if I'm sick, I won't be going out, I won't be doing these things, so my outgoings will be cut down, and that's just not the case for a lot of people. I heard Macmillan said that the average cost of cancer is in excess of £800 a month now.
It's very expensive. My personal experience, my mum did suffer cancer when I was in my very early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and I had to then go to a specialist hospital for radiotherapy, which was probably about a 40-mile round trip there, if you'd count there and back to our home. If you think about fuel prices now, that actually does add on a lot. If you're not used to commuting, that is going to impact your monthly budget. But then you also have to think about the hospital parking. That isn't free.
It's not free. No,
and if you're asked, we're using cancer at the minute. It's one of the most common illnesses out there, with 1 in 2 people in their lifetime, according to Macmillan, will develop some form of cancer. But if you think about that, even just travelling to and from and then having a hospital charge, sometimes that's up to £8.50 a day to park in the car park. Yeah. The radiotherapy she got was daily for a period of a few weeks. That is actually a huge financial impact if you're also then not working and not getting your income. And if we think about the cost of living crisis and energy bills at the moment, people have been up in arms, and rightly so, about a few £100s coming out their account, more than what it was just 6 months ago. Well, imagine actually that being because of treatment, plus your energy costs, plus then your income's also taking a dip. Yeah. It is quite a difficult situation that people can put themselves in by not covering themselves in that eventuality.
You and I, Hazel, we're both very passionate about creating awareness just generally for protection, but specifically in the rental market. Absolutely. Now, again, I read a statistic that 73% of people in rented accommodation don't have financial protection in place. So what do you think is part of the reason for that, and what can we do again to create awareness to those people?
So I think there's maybe 2 things going on there. One, going back to that education piece, a renter is unlikely to have spoken to a financial professional. So you would expect if someone's had to take a mortgage, they've got advice, it's probably been introduced to them at that stage. A renter maybe hasn't reached that stage yet. So it's like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, there's no trigger for that person necessarily. Yeah.
And there's nothing prompting them to think about that situation. And I think as well with renters, because they don't see themselves as having an asset, they maybe don't see themselves as worth insuring, because they don't realise that actually their income is an asset, and their ability to earn that income is an asset. When I'm speaking to people and trying to get them to realise their worth, I always say, if you take your annual salary and times it by how many years you have got left until you retire, that is in the millions. So you're not just insuring your monthly income, which can be a few £1,000s. You are actually insuring potentially millions. And that really makes it more tangible for people, for sure.
Definitely, because if you put a box of millions of pounds in front of somebody and said, this is your value over the next 30 years, do you want to insure it? That would then make sense to somebody. So why don't we see ourselves in that way?
Exactly. It's about visualising it, as I said earlier, that we see our pets, cars, homes as all things that are really valuable to us, but we only have those things because we have an income to pay for them. Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes renters don't quite resonate, because they think, well, I don't own a property, so why would I need insurance? But in my personal opinion, the minute somebody earns an income, really they should be seeking financial advice, not even just on their insurance, but actually how can they grow And you know, things like you help them with as well, like your wills, your estate planning. The minute you earn an income, you are valuable. You've got an asset, and that asset is your ability to keep earning it.
So true. So coming on to then, like you say, obviously Legal and General help to support many families in terms of, sadly, when they do need to claim onto their policies. What do Legal and General, or what advice can you give to ensure a smooth claims process for a policyholder?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about, well, if you take it right back to your decision to get financial advice in the first place, or when you're looking at policies online, there are policies available online, policies through financial advice, policies through comparison sites. But if you're not trained and if you're not aware of what the ins and outs of these policies are, my first suggestion would be speak to somebody who's qualified to talk to you about this. One, so that you can make sure the policy is going to work for you in the way you want it to, if you do ever need to claim. But two, to make sure you've got the right cover there, because everybody is personally different in what they will and won't need. Then when we come to the claims process, as an insurer, we have to make sure that we are also keeping safe, because there are fraudulent cases. I don't know if you saw the ITV programme, The Man, His Wife and the Canoe. It's a famous story in insurance.
Oh, yes, sorry, I've heard the story. I didn't watch it though.
It was, you know, for the listeners, just very briefly, it's about insurance frauds. The gentleman pretended he was dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
His wife hid him in a spare room for years. And I don't know which insurer it was, but we have to make sure we're doing the right thing. One, to protect ourselves, but also to protect our other clients. They don't want to be paying into a company that are funding fraud.
So true.
each and every month.
Definitely. And just expanding on the claims process, because we had a conversation when I came to film the podcast with Legal and General a few weeks ago. And you touched on a point where you'd mentioned that there was an instance where somebody had accidental death.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, one of your advisors went out of their way to make them aware that they could actually make a claim. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so as an insurer, any insurer will always want to try our absolute best to pay out. And we had a really unfortunate circumstance where a lady phoned in, her husband had passed away, but they were in the middle of buying a property. Now, depending on how you set up your policy, this might not be the same for everybody, or depend on the provider. But the way that their policy was set up is it included what we call accidental, kind of free life cover between exchange and completion for accidental death. And unfortunately, the gentleman had passed away in between exchange and completion of that house contract.
Which is a high risk time.
It is a high risk time, because they're now liable for the purchase of that property.
But haven't got the keys.
But they've not got the keys, and that mortgage was determined on both of their incomes being there. So how did they get the funds to get the keys? And essentially what happened is we got a phone call in to ask for that policy to be cancelled. Our case handler asked why, and actually it turned out it was because of death. And the case handler double-checked the policy, and because actually they had that free life cover between exchange and completion, we were able to pay out, and then that meant that the lady left could still buy that home. So it's heartwarming, that kind of story, and
definitely
we will always make someone aware of what they have if they phone in to speak to us.
And I think as well that just evidences the fact that for anybody that is under the illusion that insurers go out of their way to not pay out, that's just not the case.
No, we always want to.
Absolutely. And I think that just really highlights that, because had that person at the end of the phone not been aware, they could have easily just cancelled the policy and the lady would have been none the wiser, you know?
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, there are times unfortunately, there will be times we can't pay out.
Of course.
But that tends to be our number one reason for not being able to pay out is misrepresentation on the medical underwriting. So for those who are unfamiliar with what that means, when you're completing any insurance application, the same as car insurance, it would happen with those policies as well. If you haven't been honest and fully open in your questions at the start, and then subsequently something happened afterwards to do with that condition, unfortunately that's where we would need to review our stance.
So Hazel, can you tell us about any trends or patterns, when we're looking at things like life, critical illness cover and income protection that are impacting the industry as a whole that would be useful?
Yes, I guess the main one's COVID.
Yeah.
We had a massive, when that happened for us as an industry, that was huge. But again, the people that had income protection policies in place, they, if they had to be off work, they had that financial freedom then. So it just showed the impact that those policies could have on even during a pandemic. So that was one of them. But then when we look at some kind of medical trends, the team I'm part of, we do a lot of research as to what's going on in the economy and with people's health. And the sad one is cancer, that 1 in 2 people will get cancer throughout their lifetime. That is the number one thing that people claim on for 3 out of the 4 of our product ranges. And I think when we look at that stat more closely, the age group who have had the biggest increase in cancer diagnoses in the last 5 years is actually your 18 to 34 year olds.
Oh, really?
According to the Cancer Research UK on their website. So again, when we look at your kind of high risk age groups, traditionally I think we always assume it's those older people. It isn't necessarily. Cancer doesn't pick people based on age or where they live.
Do you know why that is, or did they?
They didn't specify in a huge amount of detail as to why it is, but when you look at the stats, when we look at the way that we live our lives, there are more and more chemicals in the environment, there's more and more chemicals in our food. Whether that's the be all and end all, I'm not sure, but when you look at their, I said cancerresearchuk.org have tons of information on it. And then sadly the other one is suicide. When we look at suicide statistics, that is the biggest killer in men. I think it's under 50 at the moment. So again, that is really, really sad. So it is again making sure that how do we support people.
On that note, is there anything else in terms of just general advice that you'd want to provide to consumers about the importance of financial protection, or advisors that might be watching this as well?
Yeah, so to consumers, I would say don't leave it till it's too late. The younger you are when you take insurance, the less risk you are. So insurance is a risk-based product. It is usually more cost effective to take it out whilst you're young. Also, what we do see is sometimes customers won't think to take it out until somebody close to them passes away or suffers an illness. Again, if that's your spouse, that might be too late. Your family is maybe already facing a financial hit. So the younger you are, the earlier you can take it out. That financial resilience is there from as early as possible. Go back to that point of, if you don't protect that income, make sure that your biggest asset, which is you, is constantly got that money coming in. Your whole life turns upside down if something bad happens. And then to advisors, I would just say, let's raise awareness. It isn't the type of thing that people learn in school. It isn't the type of thing that we wake up in the morning and think actually I need to go and check that today. So again, it's just actually taking the time.
So that's everything for today's interview, guys. I hope that you found today's video very insightful and very useful, because Hazel shared some fantastic tips. Thank you once again for joining us, Hazel. I really, really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any property, mortgage and finance related uploads from us in the future. And we'll look forward to catching you in the next video.